Thank you for visiting Youtique Lifestyle. This is the wardrobe planning series in collaboration with So Much Fabric, where fabric is sewn into fashion. In this video, I show you the process I used to create the trims for my Easter dress. The first thing I did was I played around with the different trims and explored the different ways it can come together. I did this while waiting in the car rider line to pick up my children from school. So what do you like to do while you're in the car waiting? Here are some of the different trims that I came up with. I will be using these two for different parts of the dress. This is how my waistband trim looked like. So the first thing I did was I basted a 5/8 inch seam along the waist trim pieces. Here I am basting 5/8 inch away from the edge, and I do it to both the top and the bottom part of the waistband. Next, I'm going to pin the trim along that seam, and using a zipper foot, I'm going to sew the trim on both sides of the waistband. Now for the bottom edge of the bodice and the top edge of the skirt, I will be basting two lines. The first is 5/8 inch away from the edge, and the second is 1/2 inch away from that basting seam. Here I am sewing 1/2 inch away from the basting seam. So the results are two stitching lines. I am going to pin the trim to the 1/2 inch line and sew. Afterwards, fold it over towards the edge and press. Using 5/8 inch seam, I sewed it together. And here I attached the front and back at the shoulder seams. For the armhole trim, I also had two basting lines. The first one was 5/8 inch away from the edge, and the second one was 1/2 inch away from that first sewing line. Next, I'm going to cut slits along the curve of the armhole. Then along the top 1/2 inch seam, I am going to hand baste the red trim onto that seam. Next, I'm going to hand baste the black trim onto the same seam as the red one. I found that hand basting worked better for me along the armhole curve. Using the zipper foot, I sew the trims together at that same seam. And now I'm ready to pin and sew the dress together along the sides. For the neck trim, I am going to do the same as I did for the arm trim. I'm going to sew 5/8 seam and then a 1/2 inch from the 5/8 seam. I'm going to hand baste the red trim along the top 1/2 inch seam and then pinch and snip off the excess red trim. And then hand baste the black trim along the same seam line all the way around the neckline. I will cut a slit at the V neckline and make sure I do not cut through the stitches. I'll take it to the sewing machine, and with a zipper foot I will sew it together. I'm going to revisit the V neckline, and what I did here is that I took one side and tucked it under the other and formed a straight line down the center. I'm going to flip the dress over to make it easier for myself. I did a slip stitch down that straight line, and I just worked it towards that V, and then I reversed it and went back towards the other side and did a secure stitch at the end. Next, I'm going to fold over the black trim and baste it onto the back side. When I get close to the V, I'm going to stop and secure stitch. I'm going to pinch the black trim at the center V and then stitch the base of that pinched fabric. Here I'm going back and forth on each side to sew it together. I'm going to take the pointed end of the seam ripper and basically push and tuck that pointed end under the stitched fabric. I'm going to do a slip stitch right along that line. And now I'm going to finish stitching the rest of the black trim onto the neckline. After this stage, I decided I wanted to embellish it some more. So I created a frayed trim the length of the armhole and about 1 inch wide. I used leftover fabric from another project and I just serged one side. I did cut this on the straight of grain. I simply used the seam ripper to separate the weaving, and then I just pulled on the horizontal fabric that would pull up. I repeated this process until I got to the serged fabric, and it would no longer release any more fabric. I used scissors to trim it, and then I sewed it to the right side of the armhole, matching up the stitch with the 5/8 inch seam. And now I'm ready to attach the lining. I started at the neckline and then I did the armhole, the zipper, and then the hem of the dress, and I should have been complete. Instead, my husband and I agreed that the fray needed a shaggy look, so he gave it a trim. So the dress is finally complete. If you enjoyed the video, please click like, subscribe, and don't forget to ring the bell for future notifications. Also, for fabrics, trims, and notions, don't forget to visit So Much Fabric. Thank you for visiting, and I hope you got inspired to create something extraordinary out of the ordinary.